Sy, a question for both of you. To what extent do you consider the maintenance of perpetual war a priority for this administration to fuel high military spending, continued military spending?
I don't know about fueling continued military spending. I've always likened the neocons as parasites who attach themselves to hosts. And they've attached themselves to the Republican Party, a party that I'm a member of, and I know that elicits hissing and booing in many corners of America today. But it
gives you credibility here.
The neocons are a minority element of the far right wing of the Republican Party. These are people who flourished in the 1980s during the Reagan administration when they had the evil empire. And because you had an evil empire, because they had a focus, they could sit there and talk about certain empowering devices such as, programs to build weaponry, programs that exploited the fear and the ignorance of the American public. When the Soviet Union went away, the neocons were at a loss. What do? You need something to replace it. That's where Paul Wolfowitz and others came up with the idea of stepping into the vacuum and talking about global domination. And they wrote a variety of papers that came out first in 1992, then in 1997 as the vision statement of the Project for a New American Century. And today it's manifested itself as the National Security Strategy of the United States, which were promulgated in September 2002, 1 year to the date after the September 11th attacks. And I think this is a vehicle that does create the conditions of perpetual war, because with perpetual war, you have perpetual fear. And when the American people are perpetually ignorant, this fear can be exploited, and it's been exploited very, very effectively by the Bush administration and their neoconservative parasites.
Scott, you raised the three-part issue, Sunnis, Kurds, and Shias, but you don't paint the rest of the picture. What is the rest of the picture, and can you flesh out with Iran, Turkey, and Israel in the region?
Well, I raised the three issues that are internal to Iraq, which are the Shia, the Sunni, and the Kurds. What I didn't talk about is the solution. I said withdraw troops. Look, that's first and foremost. The boys and girls got to come home, and they got to come home now. Unfortunately, they're not going to. But let's say we get them home. How do we deal with these three issues? It's going to require a multilateral approach with the United States playing a role, not necessarily the leading role. You need the Turks to give the Kurds of Iraq assurances that legitimate autonomy will be respected. And we can work with the Turks on that because we have one hell of a leverage called European Union membership. You need the Syrians to work with the Sunni to talk about walking away from Wahhabism, to get back to that secular base. And we have leverage with the Syrians. I think Sy could probably talk about the role that the Syrians intelligence has played in being the true supporter of the American war on terror. Syria has provided, my understanding, is some of the best intelligence about al-Qaeda. Jordan will play an important role. Saudi Arabia will play an important role. Kuwait will play an important role. And you know what? The Iranians will play an important role because, again, we have leverage. We can leverage a recognition of an Iranian nuclear energy program under full IAEA safeguards. We can leverage a lifting of the economic embargo that we've imposed on Iran to get the Iranians to back off on Iraq. It's difficult, it's not easy, but you know what? It's called diplomacy, and that's a lost art form here in the United States.
No. Should add also, in order to do that, this president, this administration would have to talk to the Syrians and the Iranians, and so far they have not, and officially to the insurgents too.
Scott, Israel has the arsenal of nuclear bombs. Why is Israel immune from inspections?
Israel's immune. Israel's immune from, I mean, the easy answer is they're immune from inspections because there's no mandate out there to inspect Israel. Now the question is, why is there no mandate out there to inspect Israel? Because the United States of America is a veto-wielding member of the Security Council, and we will never allow a resolution to be chaired that threatens the Israeli nuclear weapons program. Worse, we will never allow the Israeli nuclear weapons program to be interjected into the debate. We just pretend it doesn't exist. We hold Iran accountable for the Non-Proliferation Treaty, when in fact Iran has not violated the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Iran is complying with the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and yet we pretend that Israel's doing nothing wrong. Now, I'm a very fervent supporter of the State of Israel. I believe Israel has a right to exist, and I believe that we should work with Israel to develop the means of peacefully coexisting with their neighbors. But you know, it has to be based on the same standard. And when we have this double standard where we say the Israelis can do whatever they want, including working with a nuclear weapons program, and nobody else in the world can, that's a policy formulation for disaster.
Two questioners come at this from different angles. One asks, why is no one talking about the civilian casualties caused by military action in Iraq? And the other reports that she read the DoD website the other day, where apparently they list 5 civilian deaths.
Those questions answer themselves. I will say something about Israel. In this book, Scott describes in great detail how competent he eventually turned away from America and its intelligence services and took much of some of the raw intelligence that had to be analyzed, overhead camera work and intercepts, to the Israelis, because they could do it better, quicker, and ended up people thinking you were what, an Israeli agent?
Well, I was accused of being an Israeli spy, but you know, the Israelis brought more integrity to that process than the United States and the CIA ever did. When I started in 1994, Iraq was the #1 threat to the State of Israel. This was put out in the official Israeli National Intelligence estimate. When I left in 1998, Iraq was #6 and falling. And the reason is that the Israelis had actually embraced the process of disarmament that was represented by the UN weapons inspectors. When you do intelligence cooperation with a nation, it's imperative, especially as a weapons inspector, that it's a give and take relationship. And it's very difficult. You have to give information, they give you a response, and it's a feedback loop. So it's an intelligence cycle, and it requires close cooperation. If Israel could very well have used the information that we were providing them to target Saddam Hussein and remove Saddam Hussein, and to carry out a very aggressive policy against Iraq. But the Israelis recognized that if you remove Saddam, you got a bigger problem than simply keeping Saddam. And they treated the intelligence with an integrity that was lacking in the United States. The United States took everything we gave them, and instead of helping us disarm Iraq, they went out and targeted Saddam Hussein.
This is a question for you, Sy. Do you think that a tripartite state, as has been posited by Peter Galbraith and others, a Sunni, Shia, Kurd tripartite state in Iraq, do you consider it viable, and in particular, the Kurdish state?
Oh, I think it's absolutely the perfect, horrible trifecta. You're going to get a Shiite state in the south that's going to work very closely under the hands of the Iranians, be much more aggressive and hostile to Israel, which is not a policy that we want. You're going to get, I always used to say, you're going to get Somalia in the center of the country, the Sunni land. Right now, what we're doing in the Sunni land, if anybody has any doubt, we're simply killing people. The goal is to make the Sunnis more frightened of us than the insurgency. That's how we're going to try and get intelligence. And that's what we're doing, bam, bam, bam. And in the north, a friend of mine teaches at one of the war colleges, and he has some Turkish officers in the course, and they said nothing. They were discussing the formation of a Kurdistan, independent Kurdistan. And finally, my friend asked one of the colonels, "Sir, Colonel, what do you think about Kurdistan?" And he said, "Sir," he said, "there is no Kurdistan." I mean, it's not going to be pretty, and I don't know. I wish we could have the. Where I disagree with you is I don't think we'll do anything to be able to keep the Turks out of there. I think we could be looking at a serious war there, and these guys just go along, dancing their game, spinning it out, making threats as Condi did today to Congress, not being challenged on it publicly by anybody in the Congress. Is that right? There was very few, no acrimony.
No, nobody took her on. They just sat there like compliant little servants and listened to Condi dictate, and that was the end of the debate.
They licked her ear.
But what also gets me on the issue of breaking Iraq up into 3 separate entities, because this is an argument that's put out there, it's just basically correcting the mistake of history, that Iraq is not a genuine nation state, it's an artificial construct that emerged at the end of the First World War, etc. And what astounding hubris one must have to think that the United States of America is empowered to go back and redraw the lines on the map anywhere in the world because we're correcting a mistake of history. The mistake of history is being made by embracing such an absurd notion that we have the ability to come in and divide up a group of people without really consulting the people themselves.